Hey, Tim Schnurr, Inquisitive IT. Uh, Thanks for everyone who showed up. I know this is on multiple streams, LinkedIn Live, YouTube, Facebook, a lot of areas of people, I'm really trying to help out there. Uh, Inquisitive IT specifically here, we're trying to help individuals, which includes investors, high net worth investors, retirees, even senior citizens, right, to navigate a lot of the online fraud and cyber attacks. So here today, talk about those top 5 cyber attacks, and we're going to jump into some quick tips to fix them. Half hour, I'll have you in and out, but once again, thanks for jumping on, and I'll jump right into it. So of course, I go too deep here, but so like I said, agenda quick. We'll go through the 5 most common attacks. I think it's really kind of 4. It's very confusing out there. Talk about some real life examples, do some play-by-play, and really, I have a list here, I think, of 20 things that if you do, you'll dramatically reduce your chance of getting attacked or navigating those attacks. So there's a couple, I'll put them in prioritized order. I'm going to post that on LinkedIn, Facebook as well. So after this quick webinar, feel free to come back, work on these things in your personal computing. Some of the things are tech related. Some of them are just things you might want to do in terms of configurations or things that may help, or at least remember habits that you can really, lean on when these attacks come to you. So first thing, there's a lot of cyber noise out there. Consistently getting, the Verizon put out the report, which I think is, where I based these top 4 attacks from, just on those stats. Verizon does a survey every year and produces a report, the Verizon Breach Report. You could look that up. Really talks about, in the last year, what were the 5 things globally that were hurting the most in terms of dollar values, in terms of attacks, in terms of downtime for businesses. And we're talking about, really consumers, personally, investors, like I said, retirees right now. But a lot of these attacks also, affect individuals as well. It's a lot of the same tactics. And there's a lot of noise out there. We'll jump here to the next slide. And you'll see these as all considered attacks, right? And I think we need to start to break these down into a little bit of a cause and effect. So I created this slide to talk about kind of, as I said up here, ransomware is certainly an easily identifiable attack. ACH and wire fraud, #1 loser for cyber insurance. We'll talk about this and talk about how it's actually one of the harder things to defend against in this list, but also the most expensive. We can talk about some of the things you might do in terms of protecting yourself, some habits there. Identity theft, also hard to protect, but there's many things you can do here to reduce those, the information out there that is leveraged to create an identity theft attack. Account takeover, once again, these all kind of like blend in. So that's why I think there's a lot of noise. I think there's a lot of confusion on, what are actually causes and effects. Like I said, on the bottom in the red here, I think a lot of them are, tactics to getting to the actual damages, right? Or things that can happen to you. So I know it's not crystal clear, but I'm doing my best here. Third-party attacks, sometimes this falls into the cause as well. It's kind of a middle step of the pain that companies and individuals feel. So anyway, why don't I jump into a quick couple stories. We'll start to get familiar with these terms or attacks, and then we'll jump into tips, which, like I said, I'll circulate a checklist. I think that'll be very helpful. Most of the things on here you can do on your own. Some things that you might want to lean on a cybersecurity practitioner or outsourced IT provider. They call these things MSPs or MSSPs. But yeah, like I said, let's take a lot of this risk off the board and let's walk through this. So I'll walk through a couple short stories of how these attacks play by play happened. This is one I'm familiar with extremely well. There was a wedding. The vendor's email got breached, right? So there was an account takeover. Sometimes these, and like I said, going back to that page before, we saw phishing, social engineering. There's many different ways in. Some of it's malware. Some of it's getting their credentials online. The attack routes I talk about here, but they got control of their account. And why was this dangerous? Because by getting control of their email account, they could control the files. They could create fake invoices. They sent them to the wedding party. They were paid to the wrong bank account. So there's many different variations here of social engineering or tactics or attack routes to create these losses. Like I said, the number one loss of cyber insurers is this ACH and wire fraud manipulation. So there was just there was a big loss at this wedding because it was a very expensive wedding. The event vendor wasn't able to cover those costs, but the wedding party was paying the money to the wrong places. Some of the money had to be absorbed by the bride's family. Some of it had, the event vendor did the best they could to do this thing at cost or even a loss, but a lot of money went to the wrong hands. There's an example, I believe, in Singapore where a analyst was on a fake Zoom call with AI impersonation. I believe it was video and also audio to send a $25 million wire to the wrong place. So that one's kind of like hitting the news on how sophisticated using modern technology to dupe people into sending payments into the wrong places. I bought a house recently and I was terrified of sending money to the wrong place. If you think about it, if you buy a house, you've got to get a title agent. You've got maybe even a new attorney. You have all these new people involved that could be creating fake, fake presence or online. You're sending a very big check, right? Like maybe it's a down payment of 10%, maybe it's more than that. And you've got all these, as I said, vendors that are not friends and family, you're not familiar with them. They can play this fake all the way through, a real estate transaction, which is terrifying, right? I mean, once you send this money and you wire the money, it's gone. Which is even more troubling that in today's day and age in the international banking system, that money can flow to places that it can't come back. We won't get into that. But like I said, that housing transaction could have easily been intercepted by a fictitious title agent, a fictitious attorney. The money, the deposit, the collateral, the escrow is in different places, right? So, like I said, this doesn't sound like the normal cyber attack, but it is, right? I mean, you're transacting online, so it's a cyber attack, and that's why these fall under cyber insurance policies. And a lot of these cyber insurance policies for companies are carved out just because the losses are so big. Company called Fifth Wall that does a lot of insurance for tech companies and small businesses says that they're usually capped at like 250,000 max, max loss. So we'll come back to that, talk about some ways you can avoid that, or ways that you can navigate this. But this is the hardest thing to navigate. You want to confirm outside at all the different ways you can contact the vendor, make sure they're legit. Look at the routing number, make sure it's a bank that makes sense, right, in a local region. Call the attorney, call the buyers, be just crazy anxious when it comes to sending big wire payments, because this is the biggest loss. Out of band, be creative. Think about ways that you can verify this, because you really, there's so much risk here, and it's really hard to navigate this. So So the next one is what we call a SIM swap, and there are great ways to fix this or not worry about a SIM swap problem. But Kathy, and 50s, mid 50s, out shopping. All of a sudden, her phone stops working. She doesn't think of anything of it because she's in an area that's always spotty. Thinking it's a billing or service issue. She gets home, she calls a service provider, and she's been informed that someone impersonated her or impersonated the admin on the account and changed the SIM to a phone somewhere else, right? Somewhere remote. And a lot of the attacks we talk here and a lot of the defenses have this underlying theme of MFA or multi-factor authentication, right? You log in, you get a 6-digit code. You might get a push notification to a phone. That's a problem, right? So SIM swap here allows the attacker to use your phone to get those multi-factor authentication. How are they able to do this, right? Let's walk through this. They pulled dark web data. They looked at social media. They've kind of built a profile on you to actually dupe the telephone company. Maybe they guessed the PIN because it's someone's birthday. And they were able to steal this. And were they, in this case, they were actually able to steal some money. They logged in and they probably had your username and password, right? Because those are either linked on the web, they're not unique, you're using the same passwords. This is how a SIM swap goes down. And we'll come back to that again because there is a great tool that I'll recommend here that can stop SIM swaps. Once again, getting into this dark web problem, your data's out there everywhere, social media, Google, that's a problem. And it can create identity theft, right? So here was an example of someone who, and I have another friend that really got their identity stolen. It was a total mess, a lot of losses, lawsuits, years to get the credit back. So Laura here, received a call from her credit card company saying someone had to try to obtain a credit card using her name, address, and social security number. Once again, these are things that are out here. You hear these leaks. You can't change those, right? You can't. It's unlike a password. You can't change your password. You can't change your address. You can't change your name. So once they're out there, they're out there. And they were able to basically create all types of services. Amazon accounts, Netflix accounts, heat, cable, electricity, utilities. The good thing is this is inside our borders usually, right? So you're able to prosecute and follow up with it, but it's just a mess. This is similar to some of the crimes you see with squatting, right? Like it's just very difficult by state to actually get any kind of return or remediation on this. So you need to be really careful with your dark web data. You got to look at your social media profile, make sure they're closed. There's companies out there that scrub for this, especially for high net worth investors. It could be, you just have to be really careful of what information's out there and try to clean it up the best you can. Sometimes the damage is done. Like I said, you can't change these things, but you can make sure that there's not further damage or, your profile doesn't get richer or easier to leverage for attackers. Phishing. So, phishing is extremely common, social engineering, and these things can get really good. They talk about cyber awareness. Most of cyber awareness programs focus on phishing. And phishing, you get a fictitious link that looks real. You click on it. You enter your username and password. You get prompted for that 6-digit code on your phone. The attacker now has everything, right? They have everything. So here's an example of one I got recently. Funny enough, one of my favorite social media talents, Jason, right here is above that. A great newsletter to stay on top of these attacks. I think I got another one here. Florida Sun Pass. You haven't paid it, right? That looks pretty legit. You go in there, you update a credit card, and sure enough, you just gave a credit card to an attacker or something like that. So coming back to this, like I said, there's a lot of confusion. We'll kind of go through here, talk about some of these remedies or tips that we can do to fix these things. But I think it's really confusing because some of them are causes, some of them are effect. They all blend together. attackers use a combination of these things, right? Like ransomware is typically a phishing link, and it's maybe a vulnerability on your computer that when you click on that link, it executes some code that they know is on your computer because they've been scanning your computer on the internet. That sounds weird. That sounds strange, but your computer is an active device. So, they're able to look for these vulnerabilities out there. So, we'll talk about a little bit about the tech side. We'll talk about some of the behaviors that you need to do to protect yourself. But software bugs, software and configuration vulnerabilities, that second red circle there. There's a lot of things you can do to protect against that. Some of these things, they don't need clicks. Most of them they do, but some of these things can be remotely triggered and are a problem. But like I said before, a lot of these things kind of are used in conjunction for these vectors, for these attacks. Weak passwords, weak MFA, bad MFA. When we talk about weak MFA, that is one of my favorite tools. We'll get into this in a second. Brute force attacks, DDoS, distributed denial of service. These are kind of man-in-the-middle attacks, right? Like go down to Mexico, you go on the Wi-Fi at the airport because your phone doesn't work. Guess what? That Wi-Fi is fake. That's a man-in-the-middle attack. So lots of different terms here, but like I said, let's just talk about some of the things you can do to navigate these things. We talked about some of the stories and how they happened. Let's jump in because I know we don't have a ton of time here. So procedures and policies we recommend. I think one of the biggest things out here is separating your wealth from your personal. So at Inquisitive IT, we work with investors. We have investor-only laptops. They have an investor-only email. They have investor-only authentication to get in there. So separating, creating this mental wall between your personal life and your wealth and your financial life is a very good idea, right? When you get phishing emails talking about bank accounts on your iPhone, and you only do computing on your, as I said, specialized or separate laptop, it's out of place. So there's something wrong there. Like I said, separating those email accounts. I don't want to date myself, but I graduated at least 20 years ago. Most people my age kind of have a primary email account, and they kind of have that throwaway bank or email account that they shop with, they do retail with. Websites they don't want to trust, right? So there's layers here in terms of separating things. So this just takes it one step further. Using a password manager, which we'll talk about in a little bit here as well, creates complex and unique passwords. Your birthday, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, those days are over. You need complex and unique passwords for everywhere everywhere. Why not, right? Even the accounts you trust, accounts you don't trust. We'll talk about how you can use one of those. So technology, I don't want to talk too much about what we provide. We usually do customer success and customer satisfaction cyber webinars just like this one to teach people how to navigate these things. But we also provide technology. You can do some monitoring. You can be looking for unusual activity in accounts. We try not to talk too much about the monitoring. They call this detect and respond, or the reactive side of cyber. And we're really more on this hardening and making you smarter, making you do the right things to make sure you're not getting attacked. Phishing resistant authentication. I keep jumping around this, but this idea of passkeys and using these physical keys, which some people in our careers used these 10, 20 years ago, they're back. It's a little different in the way they're being, how they're being used. There's a funny smiley face here, which is using a passkey on an iPhone. So this idea of your phone number being your identity is a problem. We talked about the SIM swap. The SIM swap was the phone number being moved somewhere else remotely. if you can keep authentication right here in the room, right next to the computer, you can solve a lot of these attacks. A lot of these MFA attacks or are compromise, they call this phishing resistant multi-factor authentication, because you're able to avoid these attacks like a text message. So let's take an example of how these passkeys work. And these passkeys put an encryption private key on your device. So instead of using your phone number as your primary form of authentication, your device, which is being unlocked with your finger, with your biometrics, even with a code. But your physical location is your authentication. It cannot be stolen with a SIM swap. So let's talk about a typical phishing example. You get a phishing link, you log in. They ask for MFA this is your traditional, right? They ask for MFA, you give them the code, they have a live session remote somewhere in the world, right? Even if they didn't even have to steal your SIM, and they were able to do it now because you just gave it to them. With these passkeys or FIDO2 encryption, which are passkeys, which can either be put directly into your phone, and you should be using these on Apple, or you can be using like a YubiKey, which is a FIDO2 key. Most of the time you log onto a site, you actually don't need to even put in your email and password. They just ask for your passkey key because they know you have one. This cannot be stolen. It is right here. It is right next to you. It can be stolen. It has to be taken physically from you. This really disrupts a ton of attacks. And I've got a slide, I think I'll show later on here. But, the majority, 3 out of 4, 4 out of 5 of the attacks can be stopped with these passkeys, either on your phone, combination of YubiKeys or whatnot. This idea of using a physical device that is with you to stop these attacks is very powerful. And like I said, of all the technology things that we implement here at Inquisitive IT, that is the most effective at stopping attacks, stopping phishing, stopping these authentication attacks. So what else? These are some of the other things that are very common in cybersecurity. You're doing vulnerability scans and patching, configuration patching. You want to make sure your devices are clean, up to date is incredibly important, that you're on the newest version, and you're patching them as you go. What else? Manage browser. So if you have a, Google Advanced Protection is a kind of a weaker version of a managed browser, but it makes sure you're not looking at nefarious sites. Companies do this. If you've ever worked at a bank, you go online and half the websites don't work because they don't want you accessing those. So dedicated backups, this just really talks about having your files stored, your photos really personally, your bank accounts, your taxes backed up on, some kind of cloud or multiple different places, so you can access them if you get attacked and hacked or stolen. Configuration management, very similar to number 4. Bugs are that are clicked on and become a problem is very similar to vulnerability patching. Regular updates and patching, just talked about that. Privacy screens on a laptop, if you've ever seen those ones, if you look at them from an angle at an airport or things like that, probably not a good idea to be doing banking in a public place anyway, and find things like that. And new solutions that come along. I'm constantly looking at them. I've got great on our website, some devices that we provide for clients. So here you go, passkeys. These are all different things where passkeys can intercept, weak MFA, phishing, SIM swap, vulnerable, not necessarily vulnerabilities, but dark web data, right? Like all these different credential stuffing, all these different attacks. By having a passkey, you can basically intercept and disrupt a attack. So it's really, really effective to use a passkey or use like I said, on your phone. These are available. There's actually a website called passkeys.directory. So the way these passkeys work is each company that you want to log in with, and they call this password list. It's so much easier. You basically are able to log into each website. All the big tech companies are doing it. Unfortunately, the banks are a little behind, which is shocking here because they're the ones that are suffering the big losses. But these passkeys are, like I said, incredibly effective. It's easier. You don't have to put a password, a username and a password in. They're just asking for your key when you log on. So my wife's Amazon account was attacked maybe 5 times, and now I have a passkey and she has a passkey. And if you don't have those passkeys, you cannot get into our Amazon account. So it's really helpful for these websites. You're going to hear a lot more about it. People are going to keep screaming to the hilltops like I do. Password managers, we talked a little bit about this. You want to have these password managers set up. The reason why you want them is because you're a unique password that is incredibly complex. I actually think this is going to be one of the things for quantum computing. You can do it however long you want. Hey, give me a 2,000 word symbol password, right? I don't care. I don't know what it is. It creates it. It saves it on the side. So really powerful thing. Stop using Spaceballs 1, 2, 3 as your password. What else we got here? Like I said, phishing links are a problem. Do not click on links. Always navigate to the website directly. Passkeys, YubiKeys, may be able to help you, may not be able to help you. But you want to make sure that you're navigating directly to the website. Anytime you do things, we'll call it out of band here, by clicking on these links is when you get into trouble. There are things that can stop this. A managed browser won't open a nefarious link. There's a bunch of things we talked about here that can stop this, but that you still do not want to click on links. You always want to navigate to the page directly. Just Google it and start there, right? You want to get on Bank of America, Google Bank of America and start there. Facebook Marketplace, once again, there's people sending nefarious or ACH fraud details. It's easy to get duped here. You just have to be really careful and stick to your habits. Navigating scams, like I said, always navigate to the page. Call and verify. These ACH and wire fraud things. That is my biggest anxiety, right? Going through the home buying process, sending the money to the right place. I've seen the losses. So it's something that you cannot be triple verify. Be crazy about that. Turn on your credit card and bank notifications. That way you know when your credit card's being used. I don't find it that annoying. You can set it at a threshold, 100, 200, $20, whatever you want it. Enable Apple Pay, just so American restaurants are getting smarter about not having credit cards out in the open and using Apple Pay is always great. Avoid card reader convenience and shows transaction history. Multi-party approval is something coming up. That's really for admins. I'm not going to go too far into that. Password managers are really important, and you can open them with a passkey. So also helpful. Wi-Fi, like I said, don't use public Wi-Fi. Use your hotspot at all means. If you have to use Wi-Fi, use VPN. It's a virtual private network, kind of creating a tunnel to trust. I'll call it that. Setting up a guest network in your home is really important because your IoT devices, guests that come into the house, anything aside your phone and your laptop, you want to get really crazy, just put your finance laptop on a different network. Also helpful. It stops that man-in-the-middle attack. USB charge ports, you hear about this, juice jacking in airports. Just always use the plug. Bring a plug, don't use the USB. Other good practices, create a legacy plan on Google. If you pass away, my father passed away, unfortunately, it was very difficult to get access and data back. Dark web scans, you want to clean up your identity. That would be really helpful. Passkeys we talked about. ChatGPT and Gemini, careful what you put in there because it's going to stay there forever. Work to delete online records. Make sure social networks are private and not open. You should audit them. If you've got 1,000 people on Facebook or Instagram, chances are they're not all legit. And they might be selling your data on the black market. Stop getting paper bank statements that can be taken in the mail, open, giving your bank account information. Just use the email and the access online. So that's it. We're out of time. We're a little bit over. I appreciate it. Once again, crash course on the top 4 or 5 things. And I am going to circulate a checklist of all the things you should do to protect yourself. Thanks for coming by. Tim Schnurr, Inquisitive IT. We help investors, retirees, high net worth, family offices protect themselves and the people that they serve. So reach out if I can help. Cheers.